The cyclic AMP pathway is also known as the adenylyl cyclase pathway because that's one of the components that is part of this pathway. And the cyclic AMP pathway is one that results in the activation of something known as protein kinase A, which then can go on to phosphorylate a protein to either activate or deactivate that protein, which can lead to the activation or deactivation of enzymes. It can lead to the activation of transcription factors, so it can regulate gene expression, things like that. So it is a second messenger pathway. So to first start out, we are going to draw sort of our membrane for our cell here. Okay, and on that membrane there is going to be a receptor, because remember, in order for there to be a response, there has to be a receptor for a specific ligand, and attached to that receptor is going to be a G protein. Okay, so this is what we refer to as a G protein coupled receptor. And I'm going to put this G protein, I'm going to make it a little bit more complex and put like a little ball at the end of it, like so. Okay, so the first thing that happens is there is a ligand that's going to come in and it is going to bind to that receptor. So the ligand's going to come in, it's going to bind to that receptor, and what's going to happen, it's going to cause a portion of that G protein to dissociate, and that G protein is going to come over and it's going to interact with this protein over here, which is known as adenylyl cyclase. So we'll write that out, adenylyl cyclase. Okay, so when that portion of the G protein comes in and it binds to that adenylyl cyclase, what happens is a molecule of ATP comes in and it's split into 3 molecules of cyclic AMP. So you can see where this gets its name, right? It's the adenylyl cyclase or the cyclic AMP pathway. Now, each one of those cyclic AMP molecules can come down and it can activate multiple protein kinases. Okay, and this is your protein kinase A. All right, and that protein kinase A is a kinase, so it's going to phosphorylate a protein. So what you get is a phosphorylated protein. And what that phosphorylated protein does really depends on what that protein is and its job. It can act as an enzyme, it can act as a transcription factor, right? But that's going to lead to whatever the cell response is. So we often see the cyclic AMP pathway present when we have modifications in gene expression, or it leads to the activation of enzymes. So when we talk about different signaling pathways later on in our studies, right, we have to think about what is the end result of this signaling molecule, say like a hormone. If the hormone is responsible for the activation or upregulation of a given protein, more than likely it will use the cyclic AMP pathway. That's not always the case, right? But we can hedge our bets a little bit and say, this is what's going to happen. All right, so let's take a minute and let's go ahead and let's write out the steps of this cyclic AMP pathway. Okay, so the first thing that's going to happen is that a ligand is going to bind to receptor. Okay. So our ligand binds to our receptor. That's going to activate the G protein, which causes the G protein to decouple from that receptor. Then our G protein binds to and activates adenylyl cyclase. And adenylyl cyclase is then going to convert ATP into cyclic AMP. Your cyclic AMP then activates protein kinase A, and then our protein kinase A phosphorylates a protein. And again, what that protein is depends on the cell. Okay? So those are your steps to the cyclic AMP pathway.